Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
The final dark feminine shift before he comes undone. There isn't a dramatic goodbye. No slammed doors. No final speech. No one begging anyone to stay. It's quieter than that. She simply stops reaching. And strangely, that's the moment everything inside him starts making noise. Not because she became colder, but because she finally became impossible to control through her love. For a while, he tells himself nothing has changed. He still goes to work, still laughs with friends, still leaves her message unopened just a little longer than necessary. But then the strange things begin. He starts checking his phone without realizing it. He drives familiar roads hoping he'll accidentally see her. He remembers tiny details he ignored when she was standing right in front of him. The way she rubbed her hands together when she was anxious. The pause before she said goodbye. The look she gave him that last evening. A look he couldn't understand until she was already gone. People call this her final dark feminine shift. I don't know if I like that name. Because from where I stand, it looked less like power, and more like the heartbreaking moment someone became too exhausted to keep proving they loved you. And somehow, that's exactly when his carefully protected world begins to fall apart. There wasn't a fight. That's the part people usually get wrong. Everyone imagines some dramatic ending. Raised voices, doors closing too hard, someone saying, "I'm done," with enough certainty that everyone knows it's over. It wasn't like that. If anything, it felt ordinary. Painfully ordinary. She still answered when he texted. She still smiled when people were around. She still asked if he got home safely. She even remembered that meeting he'd been nervous about and asked how it went. Nothing looked different. Except something had already left the room. Not her. Just the part of her that kept reaching. And almost nobody notices the exact moment that disappears. I've been thinking about that lately. Maybe because I watched it happen once. Or maybe because I've been the one who didn't notice until it was too late. I honestly don't know anymore. People like to imagine that women leave when they stop loving someone. Sometimes that's true. But sometimes, they leave emotionally long before they leave physically. Not because love disappeared. Because hope did. There's a difference. A painful one. Hope keeps sending the second text. Hope says, maybe he's just overwhelmed. Hope tells itself not to take it personally when another plan gets canceled. Hope believes tomorrow might finally feel different. Love can survive a lot. Hope gets tired much faster. And when hope finally sits down, everything changes. Not loudly. Quietly. So quietly that the other person mistakes peace for permanence. He did. Of course he did. He thought she was finally becoming less emotional. He actually felt relieved. She wasn't asking where they stood anymore. She wasn't trying to explain why certain things hurt. She stopped bringing up conversations that always ended with him saying, "I don't know what you want me to say." Or, "I just need some space." Funny thing about space. Sometimes people ask for it because they genuinely need to breathe. Sometimes they ask for it because they're hoping the conversation disappears before they have to face it. He couldn't always tell the difference. Maybe neither could she. There was one evening. I remember this for reasons I can't fully explain. Nothing important happened. That's probably why I remember it. He sent her a message around 7. Busy today. That was it. No heart. No explanation. Just busy today. Months earlier, she would have answered immediately. Something warm. Something easy. No worries, red heart. Hope your day goes well. Don't forget to eat. Tiny things. Invisible things. The kind of love nobody notices until it stops showing up. This time, she replied almost 4 hours later. Okay. Just one word. No period. No emoji. No hidden anger. Just, okay. He looked at it, felt something strange for maybe 2 seconds, then shrugged. She's probably busy. He put his phone down, went back to watching television. If you'd asked him that night whether anything had changed, he would have laughed. No, but the body notices before the mind does. Sometimes it notices in ways that seem ridiculous. He checked his phone again during the commercial. Not because she texted. Just because. He didn't even realize he'd done it. That's how these things begin. Not with heartbreak. With tiny interruptions. Small hesitations. Moments your nervous system registers before your story catches up. He started looking at his phone a little more often. Nothing dramatic. Just unlocking it. Locking it again. Opening the messages. Closing them. Checking the time when he already knew what time it was. It wasn't anxiety yet. Just a slight absence where certainty used to live. He couldn't name it. So he ignored it. People ignore a lot when the discomfort is still small enough. Meanwhile, she was changing in ways nobody could see. She still loved him. I actually think that's what made it so hard. Because if she'd stopped loving him overnight, she probably would have been louder, angrier, easier to understand. Instead, she became quieter. Not because she was playing games, because she was tired. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't make you cry anymore. It just makes you stop explaining. She no longer rehearsed conversations in the shower. She stopped wondering whether she'd sounded too needy. She quit rereading old arguments trying to find the sentence where everything went wrong. Not because she'd figured it out. Because she couldn't survive living there anymore. That's different. I imagine one of her evenings looked something like this. She picked up her phone. Started typing. I miss you. Deleted it. Started again. I feel like we're drifting. Deleted that too. Then. Nothing. Not because she had nothing to say. Because she suddenly realized she'd already said it. Just with different words. Again. And again. And again. At some point, repeating your pain starts feeling humiliating. Not because the pain isn't real. Because you can hear yourself becoming predictable. Nobody talks about that part. The embarrassment of needing someone who keeps acting like your needs arrived with too much volume. He mistook her silence for stability. That's the tragedy. She mistook his distance for an answer. Both of them were wrong. And somehow, both of them were understandable. That's what hurts most when I think back on relationships that slowly unraveled. Nobody was completely innocent. Nobody was completely cruel. Just two frightened people protecting themselves in opposite directions. She reached harder. He stepped back further. Eventually, she stopped reaching. He kept stepping backward. Without realizing, there was no one following anymore. Can I admit something? I used to think people always knew when love was ending. Now I think that's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. Most endings don't feel like endings. They feel like ordinary Tuesdays. Like grocery shopping. Like folding laundry. Like forgetting to answer a message because you'll do it later. Like driving home in silence instead of calling. Like saying, we'll talk tomorrow. Then somehow, never really talking again. Life doesn't announce the important moments. It hides them inside boring ones. There was another small thing. He stopped hearing her laugh the same way. Not because she laughed differently. Because she laughed less around him. Other people still got the full version. The one where her shoulders shook. Where she couldn't finish the sentence. Around him, it became polite. Measured. Almost careful. He noticed it. For half a second. Then convinced himself he was imagining it. It's amazing what we can explain away when the alternative asks too much from us. Inner voice. Something feels off. No, she's just giving me space. Is she? Probably. And if she's not, then why haven't you asked? I don't want another emotional conversation. So you'd rather not know? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Sometimes avoidance doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it's simply deciding today isn't the day. Then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Eventually, the conversation expires on its own. Not because the issue disappeared. Because the connection slowly learned how to survive without honesty. Until one day, it didn't survive at all. What people later call her dark feminine shift didn't feel mysterious from the inside. It felt like a woman sitting alone on her couch, staring at a message she no longer had the energy to send. It felt like putting the phone face down instead of waiting for it to light up. It felt like deciding to watch the movie anyway instead of hoping he'd suddenly ask to come over. It felt like making coffee for one without that tiny ache of expectation. It felt like sleeping through the night for the first time in months, and waking up feeling strangely guilty for not dreaming about him. Healing doesn't always feel beautiful. Sometimes it feels like forgetting to check your phone, then remembering, and realizing you don't actually want it anymore. That realization can break someone's heart. Not because you stopped loving them, because you finally stopped organizing your entire emotional world around whether they chose you that day. She didn't become colder. She became quieter, more still, more difficult to reach. And somewhere, without understanding why, he felt the first crack inside himself. Not enough to change. Not yet. Just enough to look at his phone one extra time before going to bed. Just enough to wonder why the silence suddenly felt different. He rolled over, set the phone on the nightstand, closed his eyes. She's probably asleep, he whispered to himself. Maybe she was. Or maybe, for the first time in a very long time, she had simply stopped waiting. At first, he feels lighter, not happier. That's an important difference. Just lighter. Like someone quietly turned down the volume in his life. His phone isn't buzzing as often. There aren't any emotionally loaded conversations waiting for him after work. No long paragraphs asking, "Can we talk?" No moments where he has to decide whether to answer honestly or disappear for another 6 hours and hope the feeling passes on its own. For a little while, he mistakes emotional quiet for emotional freedom. He thinks, this is better. I can finally breathe. And maybe, part of him really can. I don't think he's lying when he says that. People assume avoidance is always manipulative. Sometimes it's much sadder than that. Sometimes a person genuinely feels overwhelmed by intimacy they don't know how to carry. They aren't trying to hurt someone. They're trying to escape the pressure inside themselves. Unfortunately, those two things often look exactly the same from the outside. So life continues. Monday morning. Coffee. Traffic. Work emails. Someone in the office complains about the printer again. His friend sends him a meme. He laughs. He goes to the gym after work. He watches half a basketball game. Everything looks normal. Almost suspiciously normal. If you asked him then, "Do you miss her?" he probably would have answered too quickly. "I'm good." Not because he'd carefully examined his feelings. Because that's the answer that arrived first. The automatic one. The practiced one. The one that protects him from asking the second question. Am I actually good? Or am I just distracted? There's a difference. A huge one. Most people don't notice it until distraction expires. One evening he realizes something strange. Nobody is waiting for him anymore. It should feel freeing. Instead, it feels oddly empty. He walks into his apartment. Drops his keys into the same bowl near the front door. Takes off his shoes. Throws his jacket over the chair instead of hanging it up. The apartment sounds exactly the way it always has. The refrigerator humming. The air conditioner clicking every few minutes. A neighbor upstairs dragging furniture for reasons nobody ever understands. He stands in the kitchen longer than necessary. Not doing anything. Just standing there. He opens the refrigerator. Nothing looks good. Closes it. Opens it again 30 seconds later. As if new food might have appeared. Sometimes loneliness disguises itself as hunger. He tells himself he's just tired. That's reasonable. Adults get tired. Life is stressful. No big deal. So he orders takeout. Eats half of it. Leaves the rest in the fridge. Falls asleep with the television still on. Nothing dramatic. But the body has started keeping score. The strange thing about emotional distance is that it doesn't always hurt immediately. Sometimes it acts like anesthesia. The pain arrives after the medication wears off. That's what begins happening here. Not all at once. Tiny doses. A song. A smell. An empty Sunday afternoon. He hears a woman laughing somewhere in the grocery store. For half a second. His shoulders tense. It wasn't her laugh. Not really. Just similar enough. His body reacts first. Then his mind catches up. Oh! He grabs cereal he doesn't even like. Leaves without buying the one thing he came for. Halfway home he realizes he forgot toothpaste. He almost turns around. Doesn't. I'll get it tomorrow. Later that night. He opens his phone. Not intentionally. Just. Out of habit. Her name is lower than it used to be. The conversation has slipped down the message list. Funny how something so small can feel personal. He stares at it. Doesn't open it. Locks the phone. 5 minutes later. Opens it anyway. Reads their last conversation. Nothing remarkable. No dramatic goodbye. Just ordinary words. Drive safe. Good night. Hope tomorrow goes well. How can something so ordinary hurt later? I've wondered that. Maybe because ordinary moments don't announce themselves as the last ones. Inner voice. You could text her. For what? I don't know. So don't. She's probably busy. Maybe. She hasn't reached out either. That's true. So leave it. But why are you still holding the phone? He puts it down. Immediately picks it back up. Human beings are strange. We create rules for ourselves. Then spend the entire evening looking for excuses to break them. Meanwhile, she is slowly building a life that no longer depends on whether he appears. Not a glamorous life. Social media makes healing look cinematic. Girls' trips. Beach sunsets. New hairstyles. Perfect captions. Real healing usually looks much less interesting. She buys groceries without wondering what he likes. She stops checking if he's online. She watches an entire movie without pausing to see whether he replied. She laughs at work. Actually laughs. Then feels guilty afterward. As if happiness somehow betrays the version of herself who waited so long. Grief is strange like that. Sometimes feeling okay. Feels disloyal. He doesn't know any of this. Which is exactly why he assumes nothing is changing. He thinks silence means pause. She has quietly begun treating it as permanence. Neither one says that out loud. There's this behavior I keep noticing. Men will often say, if she needed me, she'd tell me. Women quietly think, I've already told you 15 different ways. Neither statement is completely wrong. Neither one reaches the other. They pass each other like strangers walking in opposite directions. Close enough to touch. Never actually touching. A week passes. Then another. His friends notice something before he does. You've been quieter. Nah. You sure? Just tired. It's always just tired. Amazing phrase. It explains everything, while explaining absolutely nothing. He starts staying later at work. Not because work suddenly matters more. Because going home earlier means spending more time alone. He doesn't consciously know that's why. He tells himself he's being productive. Maybe he is. Maybe both things are true. Human motivation is rarely clean. Friday night. Someone suggests going out. He agrees. The restaurant is loud. Everyone's talking over each other. Someone orders another round. Someone tells the same story they've told 5 times already. Everybody laughs anyway. He laughs too. Then reaches into his pocket. His phone isn't vibrating. He knew it wasn't. He checked anyway. Nobody notices. These tiny moments almost never have witnesses. Driving home. The silence inside the car feels different. Music doesn't help. He changes songs every 30 seconds. Nothing fits. He turns the radio off. Now the silence is louder. He grips the steering wheel a little tighter. Not because he's upset. Because something unnamed has started pressing against the inside of his chest. He can't think his way out of it. So he drives a little slower. When he gets home, he notices something ridiculous. Her favorite mug is still in his cabinet. She left it months ago. A cheap ceramic mug with a tiny chip near the handle. He never threw it away. Never intentionally kept it either. It simply stayed. He stares at it. Smiles without meaning to. Then immediately feels irritated with himself. It's just a mug. Of course it is. That's why he can't stop looking at it. Inner voice. Throw it away. Why? You don't need it. I know. So do it. You're not doing it. No. Why not? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know is the most honest answer we have. Here's what I think begins happening around this point. Not certainty. Not regret. Not yet. Just curiosity. The dangerous kind. He starts wondering what she's doing. Not because he plans to reach out. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable. He opens her profile. Doesn't like anything. Doesn't leave a comment. Doesn't even stay very long. 30 seconds. Maybe 40. Enough to notice she looks peaceful. That bothers him more than he expects. Not because he wanted her miserable. Because some unconscious part of him believed she'd still be waiting. Waiting is strangely comforting when you're the one creating the distance. It allows you to believe the door remains unlocked. But peace. Peace feels like someone quietly closed it without making a sound. He exits her profile. Immediately tells himself he doesn't care. Then checks again the next morning. Human beings are rarely as detached as we pretend. Especially after midnight. This is where the shift becomes invisible to everyone else. His life still functions. Bills get paid. Meetings happen. Laundry gets folded. He remembers his mother's birthday. He responds to work emails. Nothing collapses. But inside, his nervous system has started asking questions his mind still refuses to answer. Why does the apartment feel different? Why does silence suddenly feel heavier? Why do ordinary objects keep reminding me of someone I insisted I needed space from? He doesn't have those answers. So he keeps living. Keeps working. Keeps distracting himself. Keeps saying, I'm fine. And maybe. Part of him believes it. But another part, the quieter part, has already begun noticing something terrifying. The space he fought so hard to create doesn't actually feel like freedom anymore. It feels like standing in a room that has become too large, too quiet, too empty. And for the very first time, he wonders if what he called needing space wasn't about escaping her at all. Maybe he had been trying to escape the version of himself that only appeared whenever someone loved him enough to see through him. He doesn't stay with that thought. It's too uncomfortable. He reaches for the remote instead. Turns the television on. Lets the noise fill the room. But somewhere beneath the voices coming from the screen, another voice has already begun speaking. Softly. Patiently. A voice he has spent years outrunning. It doesn't ask, "Do you miss her?" It asks something much harder. If you finally got everything you said you wanted, why doesn't it feel like enough? Nobody tells you this about silence. It doesn't stay empty. At first, it feels peaceful, then neutral, then unfamiliar. And eventually, it starts speaking. Not with words, with memories. That's the cruel part. When she was still there, he could go days without really seeing her. Now that she isn't reaching anymore, he can't seem to stop seeing pieces of her everywhere. Not the big moments. Not anniversaries. Not vacations. Those almost never arrive first. It's always the small things. The things that once felt too ordinary to remember. One Tuesday morning, he's making coffee before work. Still half asleep. He reaches automatically toward the cabinet. Grabs 2 mugs. Stops. Looks down. He's alone. Without thinking, he'd reached for hers too. He laughs at himself. A short laugh. The kind people make when they're trying to convince themselves something isn't affecting them. He puts the second mug back. Makes his coffee. Adds too much sugar. Takes 1 sip. It's terrible. He drinks it anyway. Not because he wants to. Because starting over feels like too much work. Funny how emotional exhaustion sneaks into ordinary decisions. Driving to work. He catches himself taking the longer route. Not intentionally. His hands simply turn the steering wheel before his mind notices. It's the road that passes the little bakery she always liked. The one with the cinnamon rolls that sold out before 10 in the morning. He used to tease her. "You'll wait 30 minutes for bread?" She'd smile. "It's not bread. It's a cinnamon roll. That's literally bread." "No. It's therapy." He never understood why that conversation made her laugh so hard. Now, he drives past the bakery. The line is already outside. He almost pulls over. Almost. Instead, he keeps driving. But the rest of the way to work, his chest feels strangely tight. Not because of the bakery. Because memory has no respect for timing. This is what silence begins doing. It turns ordinary places into emotional landmarks. A gas station. A parking lot. A supermarket aisle. A traffic light where you once argued about nothing. The bench where she tied her shoe while talking about her childhood. Things your brain ignored in real time suddenly become impossible to escape. Memory is strange like that. It doesn't archive importance. It archives emotion. Sometimes it hides those files for months. Then opens them all at once. He still tells everyone he's fine. Mostly because they believe him. He's functioning. He's showing up. He's laughing when appropriate. Nobody worries about people who continue functioning. We assume functioning means healing. They're not the same thing. Some people perform normalcy so well. They almost convince themselves. At lunch one afternoon, someone asks him, "So, you two still talking?" He shrugs. "Not really." "Oh, you okay with that?" "Yeah." He answers too quickly. The conversation moves on. But his appetite doesn't come back. He stares at the sandwich in front of him. Realizes he's been holding the same bite for almost a minute. His coworker is already talking about weekend plans. Nobody notices. Life keeps moving. It always does. Even when your thoughts don't. That night, he dreams about her. Nothing dramatic happens. That's what unsettles him. She isn't crying. She isn't angry. She doesn't accuse him of anything. They're simply walking through a grocery store. Talking about pasta sauce. Arguing over which cereal tastes better. She's laughing about something he can't remember after waking up. Then, he opens his eyes. The room is dark. The dream disappears almost instantly. Only the feeling remains. He reaches for his phone before he's fully awake. No messages. Of course not. He already knew that. Still, there's disappointment. Tiny. Embarrassing. Real. I've always thought dreams are unfair. They let you borrow someone's presence, then charge you interest after you wake up. Over the next few days, he starts remembering conversations differently. Not because the conversations changed, because guilt edits memory. Months ago, when she said, "I don't think you're really listening," he heard criticism. Now, he remembers her face instead. Not angry, just tired. There's a difference he couldn't see back then. Back then, he defended himself. "I am listening." Now, alone in his apartment, he hears what she actually meant. "I don't feel emotionally safe with you." Funny how some sentences require absence before they're understood. Inner voice. "You should have asked another question." "I didn't know." Didn't know. Or didn't want to know. Those aren't always the same. No, they're not. He begins rereading old messages. At first, it's accidental. He searches for a restaurant recommendation. Ends up scrolling through months of conversations. Then longer. Then even longer. Suddenly it's midnight. He's reading a conversation from last winter. She'd sent him a picture of a crooked snowman. Caption: "He looks like he pays taxes." He laughed so hard he'd nearly dropped his phone. He forgot about that. How do you forget laughing like that? Maybe because we assume joy will always be available later. He notices something else. She asked far more questions than he remembered. "How was your meeting? Did your headache get better? How's your mom doing? What happened with your brother? What are you thinking?" The last one appears often. "What are you thinking?" Funny. He almost never answered honestly. Usually, "Nothing." Or, "I don't know." Looking back, those weren't answers. They were exits. Small escape routes disguised as conversation. He sees that now. Months too late. She once wrote, "I miss knowing what's happening inside your head." He replied with a laughing emoji. Then changed the subject. At the time, he thought she was asking for too much. Now, he wonders how lonely she must have felt sitting across from someone who kept offering jokes whenever honesty appeared. That realization lands differently than guilt. It's quieter, heavier, less dramatic. Because now he isn't defending himself. He's witnessing himself. That's much harder. Something else begins changing. Music. Songs he skipped for years. Suddenly stop him in place. One evening he's cleaning the apartment. An old playlist starts playing. Without warning, the song from their first road trip comes on. Immediately, he freezes. The vacuum cleaner keeps running. He's no longer cleaning. He's standing in the middle of the living room, remembering her singing completely off-key. She never knew the lyrics. She invented them. Confidently. Ridiculously. He used to roll his eyes. Now, he would probably give anything to hear those wrong lyrics one more time. Isn't memory cruel? It doesn't return what you actually had. It returns what you failed to appreciate. He tries distracting himself. More work. More gym. More podcasts. More time with friends. For a while. It almost works. Until quiet returns. Quiet always returns. You can outrun silence for an afternoon. Not forever. Saturday afternoon. He's folding laundry. One of his hoodies still smells faintly like her perfume. Maybe not really. Maybe memory is inventing it. Smell is dangerous like that. One second you're standing in your bedroom. The next, you're back inside a moment that no longer exists. He lifts the sleeve closer. Breathes in again. Nothing. The scent is gone. Or maybe it was never there. Still. His chest aches as though he'd just lost something all over again. He starts noticing couples differently. Not because he's jealous. Because observation changes after loss. He watches a woman fix her partner's collar before they cross the street. He watches a man carry 2 coffees because his girlfriend's hands are full. Tiny gestures. The kind he'd never paid attention to before. Now, they're everywhere. Love had always been speaking in ordinary language. He simply wasn't fluent yet. One evening, his phone lights up. For a split second. His heart jumps. It's not her. Just a delivery notification. He feels ridiculous. Actually laughs. Get a grip. He says it out loud. The apartment doesn't answer. Here's something I've learned. The heart embarrasses us before it educates us. First, it makes you check your phone too often. Then it makes you reread conversations. Then it makes you miss people you insisted were asking for too much. Only after all that humiliation does understanding begin. He starts wondering strange things. Does she still drink coffee with too much cream? Did she ever finish that book? Did she finally repaint her apartment? Is she sleeping better now? Has she stopped crying? The questions become more personal, then more dangerous. Is she happier without me? He doesn't actually want the answer. Some questions hurt simply because they exist. Meanwhile, she isn't thinking about him every minute anymore. That's how healing works. Not dramatically. Gradually. She still remembers him. Some mornings she even misses him. Then she gets dressed. Answers emails. Calls a friend. Buys groceries. Laughs at something stupid online. Life quietly fills the empty spaces. Not because she replaced him. Because human beings are built to keep living. Even after disappointment. Especially after disappointment. He doesn't know this. All he knows is that her silence no longer feels temporary. It has weight now. Shape. Permanence. He lies in bed one night, staring at the ceiling. No television. No music. No distractions. Just the sound of the fan turning overhead. His mind keeps returning to one memory. She'd once looked at him across the kitchen and said softly, "I don't need perfection. I just need to know you're here with me." At the time, he thought she was asking for reassurance too often. Tonight, those words sound completely different. Tonight, they sound heartbreakingly reasonable. He closes his eyes, takes a slow breath. For the first time, he allows himself to admit something he has been avoiding ever since she stopped chasing. Maybe the silence isn't punishing him. Maybe it's finally giving him enough room to hear everything he refused to listen to while she was still speaking. And once silence starts telling the truth, it becomes almost impossible to make it quiet again. Memory is a strange storyteller. It rarely gives us the truth. Instead, it gives us a second chance to notice what we ignored the first time. That's where he finds himself now. Not remembering her. Reconstructing her. Piece by piece. Expression by expression. Conversation by conversation. It's almost like meeting someone new. Except the new person is the woman who had been standing in front of him all along. For weeks, he'd been haunted by silence. Now something changes. The silence starts bringing pictures. Not photographs. Mental snapshots. The way she'd tuck one leg underneath herself whenever she sat on the couch. The tiny wrinkle that appeared between her eyebrows whenever she concentrated. How she'd stir her coffee absent-mindedly even after the sugar had already dissolved. The way she'd reach for his hand without interrupting whatever she was saying. He used to think those gestures were ordinary. Background details. Now, They're all he has. Funny, isn't it? The details we overlook while someone is beside us become sacred after they're gone. He begins replaying entire days. Not because he wants to torture himself. Because his mind is searching for something. An answer. A missed signal. A place where everything quietly changed. At first, he searches for one catastrophic moment. One terrible argument. One unforgivable mistake. It would almost be easier if there were one. But there isn't. Instead, he finds hundreds of tiny moments. Tiny dismissals. Tiny absences. Tiny opportunities to move closer. That he unconsciously stepped away from. Relationships rarely collapse because of one earthquake. More often, they erode one unnoticed grain of sand at a time. He remembers a rainy Saturday. She had asked, "Do you want to go for a drive?" He barely looked up from his laptop. Maybe later. Later never came. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Work mattered. Deadlines mattered. She understood. Didn't she? Now he remembers something else. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She simply nodded. Walked to the window. Watched the rain alone. He hadn't noticed how quiet that silence was. Not then. He notices it now. Inner voice. She wasn't asking for a drive. What was she asking for? Time. And connection. He closes his eyes. That realization lands somewhere behind his ribs. Another memory. They're eating dinner. She's talking about something that happened at work. Someone made an insensitive joke. She'd laughed in the moment. But later, it hurt. Halfway through her story, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. Answered one message. Then another. She stopped talking. He never asked why. A few minutes later he looked up. So what happened? She smiled. It's okay. I forgot. No. She hadn't forgotten. She'd simply decided not to compete with his attention. There is a heartbreaking difference. It's strange. He remembers believing she was too emotional. Now, looking backward, she actually seems remarkably patient. She repeated herself. Explained herself. Waited. Adjusted. Translated her feelings into language he might understand. Again. 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 Eventually, she stopped translating. Not because she had nothing left to say. Because she became tired of speaking a language no one seemed willing to learn. He hadn't seen that woman. He'd only seen the version of her that appeared after months of disappointment. That's what memory begins correcting. It rewinds farther back. Before exhaustion. Before resentment. Before emotional distance. Back to who she actually was. He remembers the beginning. She laughed easily. Not carefully. She used to interrupt herself because she became excited by random thoughts. She pointed out clouds shaped like animals. She waved at dogs through car windows. She cried during documentaries. She believed birthdays deserved handwritten cards. She collected little traditions nobody else noticed. Friday takeout. Sunday morning walks. Goodnight kisses even after arguments. She built rituals out of ordinary life. At the time, he found some of them unnecessary. Now, he understands they were never about routine. They were about belonging. One evening, he opens an old photo album on his phone. Hundreds of pictures. Most of them he'd forgotten existed. She's making a ridiculous face in one. Holding 2 oranges over her eyes. In another, she's asleep on the passenger seat during a road trip. Hair covering half her face. One hand still loosely holding his sleeve. He zooms in. Not because of the picture. Because of her hand. He'd forgotten she used to fall asleep only after touching him somehow. A sleeve. A shoulder. His arm. tiny points of contact. Almost invisible. Back then, he thought nothing of it. Now, he realizes it was trust. Physical proof that someone's nervous system believed it was safe. He had mistaken security for permanence. Most people do. Here's the dangerous thing about hindsight. It removes your excuses. While something is happening, you always have explanations. I'm stressed. I'm busy. I'll make it up later. I'm just tired. Looking backward, those explanations lose their power. Only choices remain. That is much harder to live with. His apartment slowly becomes a museum. Not because she's everywhere. Because memory keeps assigning meaning to objects. The blanket she always stole. The cookbook she bought and never used. A tiny succulent that somehow survived despite both of them forgetting to water it. A receipt tucked inside a drawer from a restaurant neither of them particularly liked. He laughs. They complained about the food the entire meal. Then stayed another 2 hours talking. The restaurant had never been the point. Being together had. How did he miss that? Another memory arrives unexpectedly. They were grocery shopping. She disappeared for almost 5 minutes. He finally found her standing in front of birthday cards. Not buying one. Reading them. Every single one. He teased her. Who reads greeting cards for fun? She shrugged. I like seeing how people try to describe love. At the time. He smiled politely. Today. That sentence breaks his heart. Because she had spent their entire relationship trying to describe love to someone who mostly responded with logic. He starts remembering things she never actually said. Not because memory invents them. Because now he understands what lived underneath her words. When she asked, "Can we spend more time together?" what she meant was, "I miss feeling important to you." When she asked, "Are you listening?" she meant, "I need to know I matter." When she asked, "Is everything okay?" she wasn't asking about the relationship. She was asking whether he'd let her inside whatever he kept locked away. He answered the literal questions. She had been asking emotional ones. They missed each other by inches. The hardest memory comes unexpectedly. He remembers the last evening before everything truly changed. Nothing dramatic happened. They watched television. Ordered food. She rested her head against his shoulder. About halfway through the movie, she quietly asked, "Do you ever think about us years from now?" He smiled without looking away from the screen. "I don't know. You think too much." She nodded. "Maybe." Then she didn't ask again. At the time, he thought the conversation had simply ended. Now, he realizes she had offered him a doorway. He never walked through it. Inner voice. She kept opening doors. "I know. You kept calling them conversations. They were invitations." Silence. Long silence. Because he knows it's true. Memory changes something else. His image of himself. Until now, he'd mostly seen himself as someone who struggled with communication. Emotionally unavailable. Busy. Independent. Now, he notices something deeper. He wasn't only afraid of vulnerability. He was afraid of being needed. Because being needed felt dangerous. If someone depended on him emotionally, they might eventually discover how uncertain he actually was. So he stayed one step outside intimacy. Close enough to love. Far enough to escape. He hadn't realized the cost of living there. Now, he does. Meanwhile, she is becoming someone else too. Not because she stopped loving him. Because grief has reshaped her. She laughs again. More gently now. She trusts herself more than before. She no longer explains every feeling twice. She has discovered something painful. If someone truly wants to understand you, they won't require endless convincing. That lesson changed her. Quietly. permanently. He doesn't witness that transformation. He imagines the old version. The one who still waited. The one who still hoped. The one who believed one more conversation could fix everything. Without realizing it, he has fallen in love with someone who no longer exists. Not because she disappeared, because she finally stopped abandoning herself in order to stay close to him. Late one night, he sits on the floor of his living room. No television. No music. Just old photographs spread across the coffee table. He notices something almost absurd. In nearly every picture, she is looking at him. Not the camera. Him. He, meanwhile, is usually looking somewhere else. The scenery. The phone. The road. The person taking the picture. He freezes. One photograph. Then another. Then another. The pattern repeats. She had been looking toward him. He had been looking through the moment. He whispers softly, "How did I never see this?" No one answers. Only the quiet apartment. Only the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. Only memory. Patiently showing him what love had looked like before it became exhaustion. And for the first time since the silence began, his grief is no longer centered on losing her. It is centered on finally seeing her. Not the woman he convinced himself she was. Not the too emotional version. Not the too demanding version. Not the one shaped by the arguments at the end. But the woman who had spent months, perhaps years, loving him in ordinary, almost invisible ways. Hoping that one day he would notice. The tragedy isn't that she stopped loving him. The tragedy is that he learned how deeply she had loved him. Only after there was no one left beside him to prove it. There is a moment that almost nobody talks about. It comes after the memories. After the regret. After the silence begins exposing everything you refuse to see. It's the moment your ego realizes it is losing control. And it doesn't surrender quietly. It fights. Not because it's evil. Because it believes it is keeping you alive. That's the strange thing about the ego. It doesn't ask whether a story is true. It only asks whether the story hurts less. So when his heart slowly begins accepting that he may have lost someone extraordinary, his ego immediately begins writing a different narrative. One that's easier to survive. It wasn't that special. You were incompatible. She was too sensitive. You did your best. Relationships end all the time. You'll meet someone else. None of these thoughts arrive dramatically. They sound reasonable. That's what makes them dangerous. The ego rarely lies with outrageous statements. It whispers half-truths. Just enough truth to keep the deeper truth hidden. He notices something changing inside himself. 1 hour. He misses her terribly. The next. He feels irritated. Not with her. With the fact that he misses her. I shouldn't still be thinking about this. He says it while driving home. As though emotions obey instructions. They don't. They wait patiently until you're finished pretending. A few days later, one of his friends invites him out. Come on. You need to get back out there. He hesitates. Maybe. No, maybe. You've been stuck in your apartment for weeks. He's probably right. So he agrees. The restaurant is crowded. Music is louder than the conversations. People laugh too hard after the second drink. The atmosphere feels effortless. At least for everyone else. His friends start talking about dating. One of them nudges him. So, seeing anybody yet? He laughs. No. You should. Why? Because sitting around thinking about your ex isn't doing anything. Everyone laughs. Including him. He even makes a joke. I'll download 3 dating apps tonight. More laughter. The conversation moves on. But something inside him doesn't. Because beneath the joke, there's a quiet resistance he doesn't fully understand. He isn't ready. Not because he's still waiting for her. because something inside him knows this isn't about replacing a person. It's about confronting himself. And no dating app can do that. Still, his ego keeps trying. The following weekend, he downloads one anyway, creates a profile, chooses a few pictures, answers the prompts. Favorite movie, favorite food, weekend hobbies. It feels strangely mechanical. He starts scrolling. Faces, smiles, vacation photos, dogs, coffee shops, hiking pictures. Everyone looks perfectly fine, perfectly interesting, perfectly human. He pauses on someone's profile. She seems kind. He almost sends a message. Instead, he closes the app. Not because there's anything wrong with her. Because he suddenly realizes he isn't looking for a new person. He's looking for the feeling of familiarity. Those aren't the same. Inner voice. What are you doing? I don't know. Trying to move on. Maybe. No. What then? I'm trying to stop hurting. Silence. Then another question. Has this helped? He looks at the unopened dating app. No. It hasn't. The ego doesn't give up easily. It changes strategies. If replacement doesn't work, comparison might. He begins remembering their arguments more vividly than their tenderness. Conveniently. Almost automatically. He thinks about the times she cried. The evenings she wanted long conversations. The moments she asked, "Can we talk?" His mind quietly edits history. See, she was exhausting. See, it wasn't all your fault. For an hour. He almost believes it. Then another memory interrupts. Her crying had usually happened after weeks of trying to explain herself calmly. Her difficult conversations had almost always begun with, "I don't want to fight. I just want us to understand each other." The ego had removed the beginning. Because removing context makes guilt easier to escape. It's remarkable how selective memory becomes when shame enters the room. One afternoon, he's cleaning out an old drawer. He finds a folded receipt. Inside it, a tiny handwritten note she'd tucked there months earlier. Her handwriting leans slightly to the right. It says, "I know today was stressful. I'm proud of you anyway. Don't forget to eat." That's it. One sentence. No dramatic declaration. No poetry. Just care. Simple. Uncomplicated. He stares at the paper for almost 5 minutes. Then his ego immediately responds. Well, she wasn't perfect either. He almost laughs. What an incredible defense mechanism. Faced with undeniable evidence of love, his mind still searches for balance. Still searches for a reason not to feel everything at once. That's how protection works. If grief reaches full strength, the ego worries it might break you. So it keeps lowering the volume. Not completely. Just enough to let you function. He begins noticing another pattern. Whenever regret becomes too intense, he suddenly gets very busy. His apartment has never been cleaner. Every drawer becomes organized. Every email gets answered. Laundry gets folded immediately. He deep cleans the kitchen. Rearranges furniture. Fixes a loose cabinet hinge he'd ignored for 2 years. From the outside, it looks productive. Inside, he knows exactly what he's doing. Movement is easier than feeling. Busy hands leave less room for an honest heart. One evening, his mother calls. They talk about ordinary things. Weather. Work. His cousin's engagement. Then she casually asks, "And how is she?" The room goes quiet. He swallows. "We're not together anymore." A long pause. His mother doesn't rush to fill it. Finally, she says softly, "I always thought she cared about you very much." Not. What happened? Not. Whose fault was it? Just. I always thought she cared about you. That sentence follows him long after the phone call ends. Because it bypasses every defense. Nobody is accusing him. Nobody is blaming him. Someone is simply acknowledging what he has lost. That somehow hurts more. Days continue passing. He notices himself almost reaching for his phone dozens of times. Not to message her. Just to see if she has. Each time. Nothing. His ego whispers. If she cared, she'd reach out. His heart quietly answers. Maybe she already reached out hundreds of times while you were together. The argument ends there. Because the heart has evidence. One Saturday afternoon, he runs into an old mutual friend. They exchange polite conversation. Eventually, her name comes up naturally. Have you talked to her? He shakes his head. No. The friend nods. I saw her a couple weeks ago. He tries sounding casual. Oh yeah. She seems different. His stomach tightens. Different how? I don't know. Calmer. Still herself. But lighter somehow. The conversation continues. He barely hears the rest. Lighter. That one word stays with him. He drives home replaying it over and over. Lighter. Not happier. Not dating someone else. Not pretending. Just lighter. He suddenly remembers something she once said. I feel like I'm carrying this relationship by myself. He'd dismissed it. Now, he wonders something he never allowed himself to consider before. What if the weight she put down was him? The thought is unbearable. Immediately, the ego rushes in. No. That's unfair. You weren't that bad. You had your own struggles. All true. Every bit of it. He did have struggles. He wasn't malicious. He wasn't cruel. He loved her the only way he knew how. But another truth quietly sits beside those truths. Sometimes, the way we know how to love still hurts the person receiving it. Good intentions don't always create emotional safety. That realization requires enormous humility. His ego resists it with everything it has. Late that evening, he opens their old message thread again. Not to reread everything. Just to search for one phrase. He types, sorry. Dozens of results appear. I'm sorry I'm late. Sorry I forgot. Sorry, work has been crazy. Most of the apologies are logistical. Very few are emotional. He searches another word. Thank you. Again. Most of them are practical. Thanks for dinner. Thanks for picking that up. Then he searches. I appreciate you. Nothing. Not one result. He sits perfectly still. He can't remember ever saying it. Maybe he did in person. Maybe. Maybe not. He searches. I'm proud of you. Nothing. I admire you. Nothing. I understand. Only once. And it was followed immediately by. But. He closes the phone. Not because he's finished reading. Because he finally understands something that words alone had hidden. Love isn't measured only by what we feel. It's measured by what the other person consistently experiences. He may have loved her deeply. But how often did she actually experience being cherished? That question slices through every remaining defense. For the first time, his ego grows quiet. Not gone. Just tired. It has spent weeks trying to prove that losing her wasn't such a great loss. Trying to convince him that someone else would come along. Trying to reduce regret into manageable pieces. Trying to preserve the version of himself that didn't have to change. But reality keeps returning. Patiently. Relentlessly. Through memories. Through silence. Through forgotten notes. through empty search results, through one simple word spoken by an old friend. Lighter. And somewhere inside him, beneath the defenses, beneath the explanations, beneath every carefully constructed excuse, another version of himself finally begins to emerge. A quieter one. One that no longer asks, who was right? Or, whose fault was it? Instead, it asks something infinitely more difficult. If I ever get the chance to love someone this deeply again, will I finally know how to let them feel it? That question has no immediate answer. Only honesty. Only humility. Only the painful beginning of becoming someone different. Because the ego can protect you from shame. It can protect you from regret. It can even protect you from grief for a while. But it cannot protect you forever from the truth. And the truth has now become impossible to ignore. For the first time since she walked away, he stops trying to defend the man he used to be. And quietly, almost imperceptibly, he begins grieving the man he no longer wants to remain. There is a difference between absence and permanence. At first, after a relationship ends, most people unconsciously believe the other person is still emotionally nearby. Maybe they aren't talking. Maybe they're hurt. Maybe they're taking space. But somewhere deep inside, there is still an invisible thread. A quiet assumption. If I reached out, she'd still be there. That belief survives much longer than love sometimes does. Because hope has a strange way of disguising itself as certainty. It whispers, not now, but later. Then one ordinary day, without warning, that illusion quietly falls apart. It doesn't happen because she posts a picture with someone else. It doesn't happen because she blocks him. It doesn't happen because of one dramatic conversation. Real endings rarely arrive like that. They arrive almost invisibly, in a moment so ordinary. Most people don't recognize it until they're already living inside it. It begins on a Thursday evening. He's standing in line at a grocery store after work. The cashier is moving slowly. People around him scroll through their phones. A child is crying somewhere near the entrance. Nothing unusual. While waiting, he opens social media without thinking. His thumb moves automatically. News. Photos. Advertisements. Then, her profile appears. Not because he searched for it. Because the algorithm still remembers what his heart pretends to forget. He pauses. She posted something. Just one picture. No inspirational quote. No message directed at anyone. She's sitting at a cafe. A book on the table. Coffee beside her. Sunlight across her face. She's smiling. Not the loud smile she used to wear around groups of people. Something softer. Almost peaceful. There are only 4 words beneath the picture. Beautiful morning. Feeling grateful. That's all. No hidden meaning. No performance. No attempt to prove she's thriving. Just a woman enjoying her morning. He stares longer than he means to. The cashier calls. Next. He doesn't move. Someone behind him gently taps his shopping cart. Oh. Sorry. He pays. Walks to his car. Puts the groceries in the trunk. Then sits behind the steering wheel without starting the engine. That picture refuses to leave his mind. Not because she's smiling. Because she looks complete. There is something incredibly painful about seeing someone become whole. When you secretly believe they still needed you to heal. His first reaction is denial. It's just one picture. People post happy moments. You never know what's really going on. All of that is true. Pictures don't tell entire stories. But something deeper than logic is speaking. He isn't responding to the photograph. He's responding to the feeling it gives him. For the first time, she doesn't look like someone waiting for anything. Weeks pass. The thought follows him everywhere. At work. driving, making dinner. It keeps returning. What if she's really okay? Not pretending. Not distracting herself. Actually okay. One evening, he opens their old message thread again. Not to reread it. Just to type something. His fingers hover over the keyboard. Hey. He deletes it. Types again. I've been thinking about you. Deletes it. Again. I hope you're doing well. Delete. He locks the phone. Throws it gently onto the couch. Runs both hands over his face. He isn't afraid she'll reject him. He's afraid of something much quieter. What if she answers? Politely? People often imagine rejection as the most painful outcome. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the most painful reply is kindness without longing. Respect without attachment. Warmth without hope. His mind creates imaginary conversations. Version 1. I miss you. So do I. Version 2. I've changed. I know. Version 3. I'm sorry. I forgive you. Every imagined conversation ends with another chance. His imagination still lives in the past. Reality has already moved forward. A month later, he accidentally runs into her. Not at some romantic place. Not at the cafe from the picture. At a bookstore. He almost doesn't recognize her. Not because she looks different. Because she carries herself differently. She walks more slowly now. Not rushed. Not anxious. She notices him. For one brief second. Both of them stop. Time stretches. Then she smiles. A gentle smile. Hi. Hi. How have you been? I'm okay. You? I'm doing well. Neither of them lies. That's what surprises him most. There is no bitterness. No visible resentment. Just two people acknowledging each other's existence. He notices something immediately. She isn't nervous. Months ago, she would have searched his face for clues. Was he upset? Happy? Distracted? Did he still love her? Today, she doesn't search. She's simply present. They talk for maybe 5 minutes. Work. Family. A book she'd recommend. The weather. Ordinary conversation. Then she glances at her watch. I should get going. He nods. Yeah. A tiny silence. The kind where either person could change everything. He almost says it. Almost says, I've been thinking about us. Almost says, I understand now. Almost says, I miss you. Instead, he asks, so, take care. She smiles. You too. Then she leaves. No dramatic goodbye. No looking back. She simply walks toward the exit. The bookstore door opens. Closes. And she's gone. He stands there holding the same book for several minutes. He realizes something strange. During the entire conversation, she never once hinted that she missed him. Not because she was pretending. Because she wasn't trying to communicate anything beyond the present moment. There were no hidden messages. No invitations. No emotional breadcrumbs. Nothing to decode. For the first time, he experiences something he'd never allowed himself to imagine. She has stopped trying to be understood by him. Driving home. He replays every second. Did she smile differently? Did she hesitate? Did she seem sad? His mind searches desperately for evidence that some invisible door remains open. It finds almost nothing. Not because she was cold. Because she was free. Freedom doesn't always look exciting. Sometimes. It looks remarkably calm. Inner voice. She seemed happy. I know. Does that upset you? No. It scares me. Why? Because I always believed I'd have time. Silence. Then one final question. And now? I don't think I do. That night. He can't sleep. He keeps remembering something she'd once said during an argument. I'm not asking you to choose me today. I'm asking you not to assume I'll still be here forever. He'd rolled his eyes. Where are you going to go? Now. He finally understands. She hadn't been threatening to leave. She had been describing emotional reality. People don't leave all at once. They slowly stop standing in places where they feel unseen. Over the following days, he notices another painful shift. He no longer imagines her sitting at home wondering whether he'll text. Instead, he imagines her laughing with coworkers, calling her sister, reading before bed, planning a weekend trip, living. Not because she's forgotten him, because her life no longer revolves around waiting. That realization hurts in an entirely different way. For months, he secretly believed that although they weren't together, they were still emotionally connected, like two people standing on opposite sides of the same bridge. Now, he realizes she has quietly crossed into another landscape altogether. She isn't standing at the bridge anymore. She's already building a life beyond it. There's a psychological truth many people discover too late. When someone spends years asking for emotional closeness, their deepest desire isn't actually the relationship itself. It's reciprocity. Once they discover peace without begging for connection, going backward becomes surprisingly difficult. Not because they stopped loving, because they stopped abandoning themselves. He sees that now. Painfully. Clearly. He opens his laptop one evening. Not to work. Just to look at old vacation photos. There they are. Beach sunsets. Road trips. Birthday dinners. Inside jokes frozen in pixels. He notices something he somehow missed before. In the later pictures, she's smiling less with her eyes. The smile is there. Technically. But something behind it has already begun disappearing. How had he missed that? No. A better question. How had she carried that sadness so quietly? For the first time, he wonders how lonely she must have felt while still technically being loved. That thought breaks something inside him. Because loneliness inside a relationship is a different kind of loneliness. It's the kind that makes you question your own worth. She had survived that. She had walked through it. She had eventually walked beyond it. Meanwhile, he is only now arriving where she had been months earlier. That is another cruel truth about emotional timing. The person who leaves emotionally often begins grieving long before the relationship officially ends. The person who stays comfortable usually begins grieving after it's already over. Their timelines rarely match. One evening, he stands by the kitchen window watching rain collect on the glass. Months ago, he believed time was working in his favor. That if she loved him enough, she would always be somewhere nearby. Waiting. Patient. Available. Tonight, he understands something completely different. Love doesn't disappear overnight. But waiting does. Waiting has a limit. Hope has a threshold. Even the most devoted heart eventually chooses peace over possibility. He whispers quietly into the empty apartment. I thought you would always be there. The room offers no answer. Only rain against the window. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator. Only the life he now occupies alone. Then another realization arrives. Even softer. Even heavier. She didn't stop waiting because she stopped loving him. She stopped waiting because she finally started loving herself enough to stop placing her life on hold. And perhaps, that is the hardest truth he has faced since she walked away. Because it leaves him with nowhere to hide. No villain. No betrayal. No dramatic ending. Only one undeniable reality. The woman he kept assuming would still be there. Finally believed her own life deserved to keep moving. And it did. by the time he truly understood what she had been asking for all along. She was no longer standing at the door, hoping he would notice. She had already stepped into a future that no longer required his arrival to feel complete. That is the moment everything changes. Not because he loses the possibility of getting her back, but because he finally realizes he has lost the version of her that once waited. People imagine heartbreak as something dramatic. A man sitting alone in the rain. An empty apartment filled with tears. A desperate phone call at 2 a.m. But that's rarely how real grief works. Real grief is quieter than that. It doesn't announce itself. It interrupts. In the middle of ordinary life. While you're folding laundry. Waiting for coffee. Looking for your keys. Driving home from work. That's where the collapse begins. Not in extraordinary moments, but in places that once felt completely forgettable. By now, several months have passed. From the outside, he looks better. He arrives at work on time. He laughs at the right moments. His apartment is clean. He sleeps a little more consistently. Friends stop asking, "Are you okay?" People assume healing has happened. He almost believes it himself. Until one Tuesday morning. He's making breakfast. Toast. Eggs. Coffee. Nothing unusual. He reaches automatically for 2 plates. Sets both on the counter. Then freezes. 1 plate. Then another. He stares at them. A full minute passes before he quietly returns one to the cabinet. No tears. No dramatic reaction. Just an ache so familiar it almost feels physical. His body still remembers living as we. His mind has accepted I. Sometimes, the body takes much longer to catch up. Human beings are creatures of repetition. We don't just remember people. We remember them through routines. The coffee they liked. The side of the bed they slept on. The grocery aisle where they always wandered too long. The song they hummed while cooking. The silence they filled without realizing it. When someone leaves, those routines become haunted. Not because ghosts exist, because habits outlive relationships. A few days later, he's walking through a home improvement store. He isn't looking for anything important. Just light bulbs. He passes a display of indoor plants. Without thinking, he reaches toward a small lavender plant. Then stops. She loved lavender. Not because of how it looked. Because she said it made a room feel peaceful. He remembers teasing her. "You think plants have personalities?" She smiled. "Some homes do too." He'd laughed. "What does ours have?" She looked around thoughtfully. "It wants people to slow down." He hadn't understood what she meant. Today, standing in front of that display, he finally does. A home isn't made peaceful by furniture. It's made peaceful by the people willing to be fully present inside it. He leaves the store without buying the plant. Not because it reminds him of her. Because he realizes he doesn't yet know how to build the kind of home she had always been trying to create. The collapse doesn't happen all at once. It comes in waves. Small. Unexpected. Almost embarrassing. One afternoon, he hears someone laugh across the office. For half a second, he thinks it's her. His heart reacts before logic does. He looks up immediately. Different woman. Different voice. His chest slowly settles again. Nobody notices. Moments like that happen more often than he'd like to admit. The nervous system remembers hope long after reason has surrendered it. He stops at a gas station after work. The cashier asks, "Need a receipt?" He almost answers, "Ask her." The words rise automatically. He catches himself just in time. "No. I'm good." He walks back to the car carrying nothing except a bottle of water. He sits there, unable to start the engine. How many thousands of tiny decisions had they once made together? Which cereal? Which movie? Should we order food? Do we need milk? Questions so small. They never seemed important. Now he understands something profound. Intimacy isn't built through grand gestures. It's built through thousands of ordinary moments where two lives quietly overlap. Weeks later, his sister invites him to her son's birthday party. Children run through the backyard. Someone is grilling hamburgers. Paper plates. Plastic cups. Balloons tied to the fence. Life continues. He spends most of the afternoon talking with relatives he hasn't seen in months. Then, he notices an older couple sitting together beneath a tree. The husband struggles to open a bottle of water. Without saying a word, his wife gently takes it from him, opens it, hands it back. They continue their conversation as if nothing happened. No thank you. No performance. Just a rhythm practiced over decades. Something inside him shifts. He suddenly realizes that love, at its healthiest, often looks incredibly unremarkable. It isn't constant excitement. It isn't endless passion. It's knowing someone notices your hands are full before you ask. It's remembering how they take their coffee. It's reaching for their jacket because you know they'll get cold before they realize it themselves. She had done those things. All the time. He remembers finding his favorite snacks already stocked without asking. His phone already charged because she'd noticed the battery. Medicine waiting on the nightstand when he had a cold. His favorite sweater folded on the chair after laundry. He had accepted those gestures as normal. Almost invisible. Now he sees them for what they were. Daily acts of devotion. Love had never been absent. His attention had been. Driving home from the party. He doesn't turn on the radio. Instead, he lets the silence accompany him. It feels different now. Less accusatory. More honest. He says quietly to himself. She wasn't asking for perfection. The sentence hangs there. Another follows. She was asking to be noticed. He grips the steering wheel tighter. Because he knows it's true. One Saturday morning, he decides to clean out the storage closet. Old boxes. Winter coats. Unused kitchen appliances. Near the back, he finds a cardboard box labeled simply. Trips. Inside. Ticket stubs. Hotel key cards. Maps. A seashell wrapped carefully in tissue paper. He smiles despite himself. They'd picked it up during a vacation years ago. She insisted on bringing it home. He joked. It's just a shell. She answered. No. It's proof we were there together. Back then, he thought she attached too much meaning to little things. Now, he realizes little things were exactly where she stored love. Not in expensive gifts. Not in dramatic speeches. In evidence. Evidence that a shared life had existed. He sits on the floor surrounded by memories. Hours pass unnoticed. Not because he's trying to relive the relationship. Because he's beginning to understand it for the first time. There is a difference. Another month goes by. His co-workers decide to eat lunch at a small cafe nearby. He orders automatically. Sandwich. Black coffee. The waitress smiles. Anything else? He almost says. She'll have. The sentence dies before it reaches his lips. He laughs awkwardly. No. That's all. His co-worker glances over. You okay? Yeah. He smiles. I just forgot something. No. He didn't forget. He remembered. That's the problem. The collapse isn't explosive. It's cumulative. Every ordinary place quietly returns a fragment of the life they once shared. The supermarket. The bookstore. The highway exit she always preferred. The bench where they waited for the rain to stop one spring afternoon. The bakery that still smells exactly the same. Each location holds a tiny piece of them. And every time he walks through one, He leaves carrying another piece of understanding. Meanwhile, her life continues unfolding. She begins saying yes to invitations she used to decline. She visits places she always wanted to see. She laughs more freely now. Not because she erased the past, because it no longer defines every present moment. Sometimes she still thinks about him. Sometimes a song reminds her of who they were. Sometimes she pauses outside a restaurant they once loved. Memory still visits, but it no longer moves in. That is healing. Not forgetting. Remembering without losing yourself. He doesn't know any of this directly. He senses it. Because people eventually stop carrying grief like an open wound. They begin carrying it like a scar. Still there. Still real. But no longer bleeding every day. He imagines she has reached that place. He hopes she has. Even though the thought hurts. Because if she has healed, then she truly doesn't need him anymore. One evening, after another ordinary day, he walks through his apartment, turning off unnecessary lights before bed. Kitchen. Living room. Hallway. He pauses at the bedroom door. For years, he used to hear another person's footsteps behind him. Another toothbrush. Another alarm clock. Another breathing rhythm in the dark. Now, only silence. Not hostile silence. Just space. He sits on the edge of the bed. No phone. No television. No distractions. He simply sits. Then something unexpected happens. For the first time, he allows himself to cry. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The kind of tears that arrive after months of understanding instead of shock. They're not only for losing her. They're for everything he failed to recognize while she was still close enough to touch. The mornings he rushed. The conversations he postponed. The affection he assumed would always be available tomorrow. The countless ordinary moments that had seemed too ordinary to matter. He whispers through the silence. I'm so sorry. Not because he believes she can hear him. Because he finally can. Perhaps that is the real collapse. Not falling apart, but allowing the version of yourself built on denial to finally fall away. Because beneath denial, beneath ego, beneath regret, something softer has been waiting. Humility, compassion, presence, the qualities she had quietly hoped to meet all along. He closes his eyes. The apartment remains still. Outside, someone walks their dog. A bus passes in the distance. A neighbor laughs on a nearby balcony. The world continues exactly as it always has. Nothing extraordinary happens. No message appears on his phone. No miraculous reunion interrupts the silence. Only another ordinary evening. And somehow, that ordinary evening changes everything. Because he finally understands a truth that had been standing beside him for years. Love is rarely lost in one unforgettable moment. More often, it slips away through hundreds of forgettable ones. And if love can disappear in ordinary places, then perhaps becoming someone capable of truly loving also begins there. Not in grand declarations. Not in dramatic promises. But in noticing. In listening. In putting down the phone. In asking one more question. In staying present for 5 extra minutes. The collapse happens in ordinary places. But so does transformation. And tonight, for the first time, he walks through the ordinary with his eyes finally open. For months, he believed the conversation he needed was with her. He imagined sitting across from her, explaining everything, admitting his mistakes, telling her how much he had finally understood. He rehearsed the words during long drives. In the shower. Before falling asleep. I'm sorry. I see it now. I wish I had listened. I loved you more than I knew how to show. Each version sounded sincere. Each version felt necessary. But slowly, Something unexpected begins to happen. He realizes the most important conversation isn't waiting for her. It's waiting for him. There is a strange stage in healing. One where regret stops asking, "Can I get them back?" and begins asking, "Who was I while I had them?" Those are very different questions. The first searches for another chance. The second searches for the truth. Only one of them changes a person. It begins on another ordinary evening. He's walking home after work. The sun is beginning to disappear behind the buildings. The sidewalks are crowded. People carry groceries. Friends meet for dinner. A young couple laughs while arguing playfully about where to eat. He watches them for only a second. Not with jealousy. With recognition. Once, he and she had looked exactly like that. Two people believing they had endless tomorrows. He wonders how many couples walking past him right now are unknowingly standing at the beginning of the ending. Not because they don't love each other. Because they keep assuming there will always be another opportunity to pay attention. When he reaches home, he doesn't turn on the television. He doesn't reach for his phone. Instead, he sits by the window. The apartment is quiet. Not lonely. Just honest. He has learned the difference. Loneliness demands escape. Honesty asks us to stay. Without thinking, he begins speaking aloud. Not to anyone. Simply into the silence. Why didn't I listen? No answer. Only the sound of distant traffic. He asks again. No. Really? Why? The question feels different this time. He isn't asking to punish himself. He's asking because he genuinely wants to understand. His mind travels backward. Not to the breakup. Earlier. Much earlier. To childhood. He remembers being 10 years old. His father rarely spoke about emotions. Problems were solved with work. Disappointment was hidden. Sadness became silence. Love was assumed. Not expressed. Nobody ever asked, "What are you feeling?" They asked, "What are you going to do?" Achievement mattered. Reliability mattered. Strength mattered. Feelings were private. Almost inconvenient. Back then, he never questioned it. Children rarely question the emotional language they inherit. They simply become fluent in it. He whispers quietly, "I thought love meant providing." Another memory surfaces. Working overtime. Canceling dinner. Buying gifts afterward. Believing compensation and connection were interchangeable. She had never rejected the gifts. She always smiled. Always thanked him. Then, almost shyly, she would ask, "Can we spend some time together this weekend?" He remembers thinking, "But I just bought you something." He genuinely believed he had answered the need. Only now does he understand. She hadn't been asking for objects. She had been asking for access. Access to him. There's a difference between giving someone things and giving them yourself. One costs money. The other requires presence. Presence is infinitely more difficult. Because presence cannot be outsourced. He walks into the kitchen. Pours himself a glass of water. Leans against the counter. Another memory appears. She once sat across from him after dinner. No argument. No crisis. She simply asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever feel lonely?" He answered immediately. "No." She smiled sadly. "I think you do." He laughed. "I think you're overthinking." She didn't argue. She only nodded. Back then, he thought he had won the conversation. Today, he realizes he never understood the question. She wasn't asking whether he felt alone. She was asking whether he allowed himself to be known. Those are completely different things. Human beings often confuse independence with emotional distance. He certainly had. He believed needing no one made him strong. She believed letting someone truly know you made you brave. For years, they had been speaking different emotional languages without realizing it. Days pass. The conversation inside him continues. It follows him everywhere. At work, driving, making coffee. He starts noticing his own patterns in real time. A coworker asks, "How are you doing?" His automatic response rises immediately. "I'm fine." He stops. Actually stops. Then answers differently. "It's been a difficult year." The coworker nods. "I'm sorry." Nothing dramatic happens. The conversation lasts maybe 30 seconds. But afterward, he notices something. Telling the truth didn't make him weaker. It made him feel lighter. Maybe she had known that all along. The following weekend, he visits his older brother. They haven't spent much time together recently. After dinner, they sit outside. The air is cool. Neither of them says much. Eventually, his brother asks, "Still thinking about her?" He nods. Every day. His brother waits. Doesn't interrupt. Then he quietly says, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I don't think you're grieving the breakup anymore." "What do you mean?" "I think you're grieving the person you wish you'd been." The words land heavily. Because they're true. He's no longer replaying the final argument. He's replaying ordinary Tuesdays. The evenings he stayed distracted. The moments he said, "Later." The times she reached toward him emotionally. And found only half of his attention. Driving home, he repeats that sentence over and over. "I think you're grieving the person you wish you'd been." Perhaps that's what growth feels like. Not hating your former self. Simply recognizing that you've outgrown him. One rainy afternoon, he decides to do something he has avoided for months. He takes out a notebook. Not his phone. Actual paper. He writes one sentence at the top. "Things I never said." At first, nothing comes. The page remains blank. Then, slowly, the words begin arriving. "I'm proud of you. I noticed how hard you were trying. I'm sorry you felt alone beside me. I didn't understand what you were asking. Thank you for believing in us longer than I deserved. I was afraid of depending on someone. I mistook emotional distance for maturity. You deserved someone who listened before defending himself." He keeps writing. Page after page. No audience. No intention of sending it. Just honesty. The kind that had frightened him while she was still there. Halfway through, he suddenly begins crying. Not because of what he wrote. Because of what he finally didn't avoid. For the first time in his life, he isn't arguing with his own feelings. He isn't explaining them away. He isn't negotiating with them. He's simply allowing them to exist. The notebook remains open on the table. He notices another sentence waiting to be written. One he doesn't want to write. One that frightens him more than all the others. Finally, he does. "I forgive myself for not knowing then what I know now." He stares at it. It feels almost wrong. Doesn't forgiveness let him off too easily? Another thought answers. No. Forgiveness isn't pretending the damage never happened. It's choosing not to remain trapped inside the worst version of yourself forever. Regret teaches. Shame only freezes. She had wanted him to grow. Not to become his own lifelong punishment. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, she is living another ordinary day. She has started smiling without wondering whether someone notices. She makes weekend plans without checking anyone else's schedule. She buys flowers simply because she likes how they brighten the apartment. Sometimes, she still remembers him. A certain song. A familiar street. The smell of fresh coffee. Memory still visits. But now, it feels like opening an old photo album. Tender. Bittersweet. Complete. not unfinished. She no longer imagines conversations that never happened. Because she has already had the most important one. The one where she finally told herself, I deserve to stop waiting. That conversation changed her life. Back in his apartment, he continues writing. Hours pass unnoticed. The notebook is nearly full. Then he reaches the final page. He writes only one question. What kind of man do I want to become now? He doesn't answer immediately. Because this question cannot be solved by beautiful words. Only by repeated actions. Listening before speaking. Staying present during uncomfortable conversations. Putting the phone away when someone shares their heart. Choosing curiosity instead of defensiveness. Saying, tell me more. Instead of, you're overreacting. Showing affection before it's requested. Expressing appreciation before it's overdue. Small things. Ordinary things. The very things that once seemed insignificant. Another realization quietly settles inside him. He understands now why he keeps imagining conversations with her. It isn't because he still needs her response. It's because she awakened questions inside him that no one else ever had. Questions about love. About vulnerability. About emotional courage. About the kind of life he wants to build. In that sense, their conversation never really ended. It simply changed speakers. Now, he is finally answering the questions she asked years ago. Not with explanations. With transformation. Late that night, he closes the notebook. The apartment is completely silent. Moonlight spills softly across the floor. He notices something surprising. For the first time since she left, he doesn't feel the urge to reach for his phone. Not because he no longer misses her. Because he finally understands that no message could replace the work that still belongs to him. Some conversations cannot happen through text. Some apologies cannot be measured by words. Some forms of love arrive too late to repair the past. But just in time to transform the future. He walks toward the bedroom. Pauses by the window one last time. The city glows quietly below. Thousands of people living their own ordinary lives. Making mistakes. Missing chances. Learning too late. Beginning again. He whispers into the darkness. Thank you. Not because losing her was easy. Not because pain was necessary. But because somewhere inside all that heartbreak, she had unknowingly introduced him to the one person he had spent his entire life avoiding. Himself. And perhaps, that is where every true conversation about love eventually leads. Not back to another person, but inward. To the place where honesty finally becomes louder than pride. Where responsibility becomes stronger than regret. Where love is no longer something you merely feel, but someone you choose to become. Sometimes, people spend years trying to change someone they love. They explain. They plead. They compromise. They wait. They become more patient. More understanding. More forgiving. They hope that if they love deeply enough, the other person will finally see what has been standing in front of them all along. And sometimes, nothing changes. Not because the love wasn't real. Because the timing wasn't. There is a painful irony in many relationships. The person asking for emotional connection often cannot create transformation while they are still present. Not because they are doing something wrong. Because their presence accidentally protects the other person from experiencing the full weight of their absence. As long as she stayed, he could postpone. As long as she answered, he could assume. As long as she forgave, he could believe there would always be another opportunity. Love became predictable. Predictability became comfort. Comfort slowly became blindness. When she finally stopped reaching, something remarkable happened. For the first time, reality began teaching what her words never could. Months earlier, she had looked at him across the dinner table and quietly said, I don't think you understand what this feels like. He answered almost immediately. I do. Looking back, he realizes he didn't. He understood her sentences. He didn't understand her experience. Those are not the same thing. Understanding language is easy. Understanding loneliness often requires living through it yourself. Now, every quiet evening teaches him what her explanations once tried to. Every unanswered instinct to share something. Every empty passenger seat. Every celebration that feels strangely incomplete. Every ordinary success without the person who would have been happiest for him. The lessons continue. Patiently. Relentlessly. No argument. No accusation. Just experience. Sometimes experience is the only teacher pride will accept. One afternoon, he receives good news at work. A project he spent months leading is finally approved. His co-workers congratulate him. Someone suggests celebrating after work. He smiles. Thanks everyone. For a brief moment, he feels genuinely happy. Then, almost automatically, he reaches for his phone. Not to post about it. Not to text a friend. To tell her. Because for years, she had been the first person he wanted to share good news with. He unlocks the screen. His thumb hovers over her name. Then slowly lowers the phone again. The habit remains. The destination no longer exists. Driving home, he wonders something he never asked himself before. How many victories had she quietly celebrated alone because he wasn't emotionally available? How many difficult days had she carried without interrupting his schedule? How many moments had she wanted to share? Only to decide. He's busy. The question stays with him. Not because it has an answer. Because it changes the way he sees the past. For a long time, he believed relationships ended because of the final argument. Now he understands something different. Relationships often end because of hundreds of conversations that never truly happened. The argument is simply where accumulated silence finally speaks. Another week passes. He visits a local park on Sunday morning. Children chase pigeons across the grass. An elderly man feeds ducks by the lake. People jog along the walking path. Life unfolds without urgency. He sits on a bench. Nearby, a young woman is teaching her little daughter how to ride a bicycle. The child keeps falling. Each time, she looks back nervously. Did you see? The mother smiles. I saw. Again. The little girl pedals a few feet farther. Mom. I saw. Nothing extraordinary. Just attention. Complete attention. He watches for nearly 20 minutes. Not because of the bicycle. Because of the mother's eyes. She never looks at her phone. Never seems distracted. The child isn't asking for perfection. She's asking to be witnessed. Suddenly, he remembers something she once told him. I don't always need you to fix things. I just want to know you're with me. Back then, he thought she was asking too much. Now, watching that little girl repeatedly search for her mother's eyes, he understands. Being witnessed is one of the deepest human needs. To know someone is emotionally present while your life unfolds. That is intimacy. He closes his eyes. Memory begins assembling itself differently now. Not as isolated events. As patterns. She reached. He minimized. She explained. He defended. She waited. He postponed. She adapted. He relaxed. She became quieter. He assumed everything was fine. Eventually, she disappeared emotionally before she disappeared physically. The pattern seems so obvious now. Why hadn't he seen it? Because patterns are almost invisible while we're living inside them. There is another truth that arrives unexpectedly. He begins to realize. She didn't actually change him after she left. She revealed the capacity for change that had always existed inside him. Her absence didn't create empathy. It uncovered it. Her silence didn't invent reflection. It finally gave reflection enough room to speak. Growth had always been possible. It simply had no reason to happen while comfort remained untouched. Meanwhile, her transformation continues quietly. She no longer measures her worth by whether someone chooses her. She chooses herself in countless ordinary ways. She says no without guilt. She rests without apologizing. She laughs without wondering whether she's being too much. She enjoys quiet mornings with coffee and books. She spends time with friends who make her feel seen. She has stopped explaining herself to people determined to misunderstand her. Not because she became harder, because she became gentler with herself. That is the shift. The final one. Not becoming emotionally unavailable. Becoming emotionally available. To herself. Months ago, he feared she would stop loving him. What he never imagined was that she would stop abandoning herself for him. That changed everything. One evening, he visits a mutual friend's housewarming party. He almost doesn't go, but something inside him says yes. People are laughing. Music plays softly in the background. Someone is cooking in the kitchen. Conversations overlap. Life. Simple. Warm. At one point, someone mentions her name. Not dramatically. Just naturally. I saw her a few weeks ago. Another friend smiles. She seems really peaceful. No one says. She seems happier without him. No one criticizes him. No one compares. They simply describe her as peaceful. That word follows him home. Peaceful. Not excited. Not vindictive. Not triumphant. Peaceful. Perhaps. That had been all she wanted from the beginning. Not perfection. Peace. He lies awake that night thinking about the difference. He had spent so much energy trying to avoid conflict. Ironically, his emotional avoidance had created the very suffering both of them feared. Peace is not the absence of difficult conversations. Peace is the presence of emotional safety. He finally understands that. Too late for them. Maybe not too late for the person he is becoming. The following morning, he takes a different route to work. He walks instead of driving. The city feels strangely beautiful. Morning sunlight reflects off windows. People carry coffee cups. Dogs pull gently on their leashes. A florist arranges fresh flowers outside her shop. Months ago, he walked through the same streets consumed by regret. Today, regret remains. But something else walks beside it. Gratitude. A complicated gratitude. Not for losing her, but for finally seeing. He thinks, if she had stayed, would I have ever become this honest? He doesn't know. Perhaps not. Sometimes, the lesson arrives only after the classroom disappears. He begins noticing subtle changes in himself. He listens longer during conversations. He interrupts less. He thanks people more often. He calls his mother simply to ask how she's doing. He tells his brother, I appreciate you. His brother pauses. Smiles. You've changed. He answers quietly. I'm trying to. Trying. Not pretending to have arrived. Transformation isn't an event. It's a practice. There is a misconception about regret. People assume regret only causes suffering. Healthy regret does something else. It reorganizes values. It teaches us what actually mattered. Before losing her, he believed success was measured by productivity. Now, he understands another kind of success. Being fully present while someone tells you about their day. Remembering the story they shared last week. Looking into their eyes instead of over their shoulder. Saying, I'm listening. And meaning it. These moments never appear on resumes. Yet they quietly determine the quality of a life. Late one afternoon, Rain begins falling as he walks home. He doesn't run for cover. He simply keeps walking. Months ago, Rain reminded him only of memories they had shared. Today, it reminds him of something else. Growth. Rain doesn't force a tree to grow overnight. It returns. Again. And again. Quietly. Patiently. Transformation happens the same way. Not through one apology. Not through one realization. Through countless small choices repeated over time. He reaches his apartment. Before unlocking the door, he pauses. There was a time when opening this door meant confronting unbearable silence. Tonight, the silence feels different. Not empty. Open. Like a room waiting to become something new. He steps inside. Sets down his keys. Looks around. This apartment has witnessed every stage of his journey. Denial. Anger. Regret. Longing. Reflection. Acceptance. It has held every version of him, including the one he no longer wishes to be. He smiles sadly. Not because the pain is gone, because it has changed shape. It no longer asks, "How do I get her back?" It asks, "How do I become someone who never overlooks love again?" That question will follow him for the rest of his life. Perhaps it should. Because some people continue influencing us long after they stop walking beside us. Not through their presence, but through the person their absence quietly invites us to become. And maybe that is the deepest paradox of all. She spent years trying to change him while standing beside him. Nothing seemed to work. Then, the day she finally chose herself, the lessons she had been trying to teach him began unfolding naturally. Not because she planned it. Not because she wanted revenge. But because reality has a language that no amount of explanation can replace. Her final shift was never about making him miss her. It was about reclaiming herself. Yet in doing so, she unknowingly became the greatest teacher he had ever known. Not by speaking louder. Not by loving harder. Not by waiting longer. But by quietly walking forward. Sometimes, the most transformative act of love is not convincing someone to change. It is having the courage to stop sacrificing yourself and allowing life to finish the lesson you no longer need to teach. There is a version of love that many people never recognize until it has already ended. Not the passionate beginning, not the painful ending, but the quiet middle, the ordinary days, the shared routines. The moments that seemed too small to remember. Those were the moments that carried everything. And now, months have become more than a year. Life has continued, just as it always does. The seasons have changed. Birthdays have passed. Friends have moved. New jobs have begun. Old habits have disappeared. Time has done what time always does. It has carried both of them forward. But not in the same direction. He still thinks about her. Not every minute anymore. Not every morning. Not with the unbearable weight he once carried. The memories have become quieter. Less like storms. More like photographs. He no longer reaches for his phone every time something reminds him of her. E no lunge imaginas dramatic reuniões. He no longer rehearses apologies before falling asleep. Something inside him has settled. Not because he stopped loving. Because he finally accepted that love cannot undo time. Acceptance is not the opposite of love. Sometimes, it is love's most mature form. One Saturday afternoon, he walks through the neighborhood farmer's market. Fresh flowers. Handmade candles. Local bread. Children laughing between stalls. Musicians playing soft acoustic songs. It is the kind of afternoon they would have enjoyed together. Years ago, she would have stopped at every flower stand. He would have smiled impatiently. Do we really need to look at every bouquet? She would laugh. No. Then pause. But we can. Back then, He always thought she moved too slowly. Now, he understands she wasn't moving slowly. She was actually living. He slows his own pace. Not because anyone tells him to. Because he wants to. He notices the smell of fresh bread. The warmth of sunlight across the pavement. The elderly couple holding hands without speaking. A little boy proudly showing his father a drawing. Life has always been made of these moments. He simply spent too many years walking past them. He buys a small bouquet of wildflowers. Not for anyone. Just because they remind him that beauty doesn't need a reason to exist. As he leaves the market, he passes a bookstore. Without thinking, he walks inside. The familiar scent of paper instantly surrounds him. Months ago, this place would have hurt. Now, it simply feels peaceful. He wanders slowly through the shelves. A title catches his attention. The Art of Paying Attention. He smiles. She would have loved that title. He buys it. Not because it reminds him of her. Because it reminds him of the person he has become. That evening, while reading on his balcony, he hears laughter from the apartment next door. A young couple is assembling furniture. They keep making mistakes. Laughing. Starting over. He watches for a moment. Then quietly returns to his book. There is no jealousy anymore. Only a quiet hope. He hopes they notice each other. He hopes they listen while there is still time. He hopes they understand what took him years to learn. Several weeks later, he unexpectedly sees her. Not because they arranged it. Not because fate intervened. Simply because life occasionally crosses old paths. It happens at a small cafe on a rainy afternoon. She is standing near the counter waiting for her coffee. He almost walks away. Not from fear. From respect. Then she notices him. Their eyes meet. She smiles. A genuine smile. Warm. Calm. Free of awkwardness. Hi. Hi. How have you been? Good. You? I'm doing well. Neither of them rushes. Neither avoids the moment. There is something beautiful about two people who have finally stopped trying to rewrite the past. They sit together for a few minutes. Only because there happens to be one empty table. The conversation is simple. Work. Family. Books. Travel. Ordinary things. Yet beneath every sentence, an invisible truth exists. These are no longer two wounded people searching for answers. These are two different people than the ones who once loved each other. He notices something immediately. She laughs more easily now. She no longer studies his face, searching for emotional reassurance. She doesn't seem anxious about saying the wrong thing. She isn't carefully monitoring his mood. She simply exists. Comfortably. Naturally. He suddenly remembers the woman she used to be before the relationship slowly taught her to question herself. Somehow, she has found pieces of that woman again. At one point, she excuses herself to answer a phone call. He watches her walk toward the window. She smiles while talking. Completely relaxed. For the first time. He doesn't wonder whether she's dating someone. He doesn't need to know. Because he realizes something quietly heartbreaking. Her happiness no longer depends on the answer. Whether she is alone. Whether someone new loves her. Whether life has taken unexpected turns. She has learned how to belong to herself. That was always the destination. Not another relationship. Herself. She returns. I'm sorry. No problem. They continue talking. Then, almost absent-mindedly, she says something that changes everything. I've been really enjoying my life lately. Such a simple sentence. No hidden message. No attempt to make him regret anything. Just truth. He believes her immediately. Not because her life must be perfect. Because peace has a way of revealing itself without explanation. Years ago, He might have felt threatened by those words. Today, he feels something else. Relief. Real love. Even after loss. Still wants the other person to find peace. Even if that peace no longer includes you. Eventually, they stand. It was really nice seeing you. You too. There is a brief pause. Not uncomfortable. Simply full. Full of everything that no longer needs to be said. He could apologize. He could explain everything he has learned. He could tell her about the notebook, the therapy, the long walks, the nights spent confronting himself. He could describe every lesson, every regret, every transformation. But then, he realizes something. She doesn't need any of it. Not because it wouldn't matter. Because she no longer requires his understanding in order to continue living her life. That realization hurts. Yet somehow, it also feels right. Growth delayed is still growth. But it cannot demand another person's timeline. Instead, he simply says, "I'm really happy you're doing well." She smiles. "Thank you. I hope you are too." "I am." And for the first time, he doesn't say it to sound strong. He says it because it's becoming true. She walks toward the door. The rain outside has stopped. Sunlight begins breaking through the clouds. He watches her disappear into the crowd. Not dramatically. Just naturally. Like someone walking toward the life she spent years creating. He doesn't follow. He doesn't call her name. He doesn't imagine stopping her. Because this isn't the ending of a love story. That ending happened long ago. This is the ending of his attachment to what can no longer be changed. There is a difference. As he walks home, he notices that he isn't replaying the conversation. He isn't analyzing every sentence. He isn't wondering whether she still loves him. Those questions have quietly disappeared. Instead, another thought arrives. I'm grateful I knew her. Just that. Nothing more. Sometimes gratitude is what remains after longing has completed its work. That evening, he opens the notebook he began months ago. The one titled, Things I Never Said. He reads through every page. The apologies. The confessions. The realizations. The promises. Then, on the final page, beneath the question, what kind of man do I want to become now? He writes one last sentence. The kind who notices love while it is still being given. He closes the notebook. This time, not because the story is unfinished, because it is complete. Meanwhile, she is at home, watering the plants on her windowsill. Music plays softly in the background. She makes herself tea, reads a few pages of a novel, answers a message from a friend. She thinks about seeing him today. For a moment, she smiles. Not with sadness. Not with longing. With appreciation. She silently wishes him well. Then, she returns to her evening. That is what healing looks like. The memory remains. Life continues. Perhaps this is the part of the story that surprises most people. They expect the ending to be a reunion or permanent separation. But real endings are rarely that simple. Sometimes, the greatest love story isn't about two people finding their way back to each other. It's about two people finally finding themselves. One discovered herself by learning when to stop waiting. The other discovered himself by learning why someone had stopped waiting in the first place. Their journeys were different. Yet both required the same thing. Honesty. There is one final truth that almost no one wants to hear. Understanding arrives on its own schedule. Not ours. You cannot force another person to see your value before they are ready. You cannot explain someone into emotional maturity. You cannot love someone so completely that they no longer have to face themselves. Every person must eventually meet the version of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Some do it while the relationship is still alive. Others, only after it has ended. Neither path changes the reality of time. Perhaps that is why her final shift mattered so much. She stopped trying to carry two people's emotional growth. She released the responsibility of convincing him. She trusted life to teach what she no longer could. And life did. Not through punishment. Not through revenge. But through consequence. The quiet, honest consequence of losing someone who had loved him well. If you are listening to this story, perhaps you recognize yourself in one of them. Maybe you are the one who kept explaining until your voice grew tired. Maybe you are the one who believed there would always be more time. Maybe you are somewhere in between. Still hoping. Still learning. Still becoming. Wherever you are, remember this. Love is not usually lost because people stop caring. It is often lost because they stop noticing. Notice the person waiting beside you. Notice the conversation they are trying to have. Notice the small acts of care that repeat every ordinary day. Notice the version of yourself that still has time to choose differently. Because one day, the greatest tragedy is not that someone leaves. It is realizing they had already given you everything you needed to understand. And by the time you finally did, they no longer needed you to. That isn't a punishment. It isn't fate. It is simply the quiet truth that life eventually teaches us all. The deepest expressions of love cannot survive on potential forever. They survive on presence, on attention, on ordinary moments honored while they are still unfolding. And perhaps, that is the lesson hidden inside every ending. Not that love failed, but that love was asking us every single day to wake up before it became a memory.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.